Good evening, everyone. Good evening. And welcome to the Anisfield Wolf Book Awards for 2015. I'm Ron Richard, President and CEO of the Cleveland Foundation, and I'm delighted to once again join in this evening's festivities. It is always, as you know, my favorite night of the year. Tonight marks a special occasion for the Anisfield Wolf Book Awards. It's our 80th anniversary of celebrating diversity and confronting racism through literature. This evening, we remember Edith Anisfield Wolf, who established this prize in 1935 to blaze a path for social justice. Edith would be thrilled 80 years later by our 2015 award winners. She'd love to see citizens from across Greater Cleveland and beyond gathered here to experience and honor transformative literature. But to be candid, I think that Edith would also be a bit crestfallen that in 2015, which must have seemed like the distant future to her, we still have such a long way to go in addressing injustice and confronting the inequalities so many in our community and in our nation still face every single day. I remember that when Barack Obama was elected President of the United States, I briefly wondered, will these Anisfield Wolf Book Awards someday become obsolete? Unfortunately, I don't have those thoughts anymore. Just think of the shattering events that continue to roil our nation, from Ferguson and Baltimore to Charleston and our hometown of Cleveland. Our city needs to make wide-scale changes to improve relations between police officers and our citizens. This summer, I was a member of the selection panel for Cleveland's Community Police Commission, which will recommend those changes. We're making progress, but I have seen firsthand the long, long road ahead and the width of the chasm which separates our police force and our minority communities. So this is a critical time to be part of the conversation. And within that conversation, the Anisfield Wolf Book Awards make a powerful statement. These books give a voice to those who have gone unheard for too long. The words of our 2015 winners have never been more essential to this region, to the nation, and the world, and it's time to listen. Tonight's winners peel back layers of history, but they also look ahead. To read these books is to be truly enlightened, to sit with the past, no matter how uncomfortable it may be, and share in the future. In A Brief History of 7 Killings, our fiction winner, Marlon James, uses a chorus of voices to break open a decades-long story of violence, crime, politics, and race, from island nation to big city. In A Tale of Two Plantations, our nonfiction winner, Richard S. Dunn, chronicles and contrasts plantation regimes in Jamaica and Virginia with raw detail, originality, and persistence. In The Problem of Slavery in the Age of Emancipation, our Lifetime Achievement winner, David Breon Davis, unearths a wide-ranging history of 19th century slavery and abolition as he completes a trilogy that surely will stand the test of time. Poetry is a new official category this year. Yay! And you'll quickly see why we added it and why we have 2 winners. Their work is that strong. It's outstanding. In the New Testament, Jericho Brown's poetry is lyrical and exciting. Rooted in the South, his work explores, among other things, masculinity, sexuality, and race in all their complexities. In Hard Love Province, Marilyn Chin fuses Eastern and Western imagery and history, linking themes of loss and identity with poetic forms as varied as the haiku, sonnets, and elegies. All of you have endeavored to connect us to your world. All of you, authors, have succeeded in expanding ours. We thank you for your words, for your work, and for honoring us with your presence here tonight. So thank you. As we think about a brighter future and in keeping with our recent tradition of featuring a poetry reading by a young local student, it is my pleasure to introduce Josiah Polson. Josiah is a 5th grader at the Lawndale Elementary School in Akron, Ohio. He crafted his original poem, Am I Invisible?, under the auspices of our partner, Kent State University's Wick Poetry Center. So please extend a very warm greeting to Josiah.
Am I invisible? I've been down long roads, said yes when I meant no. I lost control of the wheel. Do you ever wonder, when you listen to the thunder, why your world feels so small? Do you ever think of what you're standing at the brink of, feel like giving up but can't walk away? Put yourself on the line, though you feel inside like they don't know you're alive. Night after night, trying to decide, am I gonna speak out or get lost in the crowd? When the lights go down in this city, I'll be right here, shining.
Wow, thank you, Josiah. What can I say? He said it all. What a powerful and compelling young voice. Kathleen, would you please come and stand next to me, if you would? I'd like to take a moment to recognize my very dear friend and colleague, Kathleen Cerveni, the Cleveland Foundation's Director of Institutional Learning and Arts Initiatives, our Program Director for the Arts for so many years. Kathleen is retiring this month after 24 years at the Foundation. Many of you, I'm sure, are aware of the powerful impact that Kathleen has had on the community over these past 3 or more decades. In the 90s, Kathleen led the Civic Study Commission on the Performing Arts, jump-starting public funding for the arts in Cleveland. She helped reintroduce the arts into Cleveland public schools and launched the Community Partnership for Arts and Culture. She also launched the Foundation's Engaging the Future program to connect more people to the arts, as well as Creative Fusion, our widely acclaimed residency program for international artists. Kathleen's receipt of the Cleveland Arts Prize in 2014 is a true testament to her enduring contributions to our community. So Kathleen, you will be sorely, sorely missed by all of us at the Foundation and by countless grantee partners, but we know you will continue to bless Greater Cleveland with your poetry, your artistry, and your leadership. So thank you very, very much. finally, on behalf of the Cleveland Foundation, I would like to thank the many community partners who have made the Anisfield Wolf Book Awards possible. And I think you'll see the names on the screen. I would now like to officially welcome our longtime, incomparable, and inimitable MC, Dr. Henry Louis Gates, Jr. of Harvard University. And if I could go off script, I would just say that thank God he's inimitable, because I don't think the world could handle more than one Skip Gates. Skip chairs our prestigious Anisfield Wolf jury, which also includes novelist Joyce Carol Oates, historian Simon Schama, psychologist Steven Pinker, and our dear friend, poet Rita Dove. And we're delighted that Rita and Fred are here with us tonight. Take a bow, Rita. You too, Fred. I'd like to thank Dr. Gates for his wonderful leadership, stewardship, and support of the Anisfield Wolf Book Awards. He has taken them since he took over emceeing this event and heading the jury, taken them to new heights, and they get better every year under your leadership. So we're privileged to have him with us here tonight. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Gates.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Really, can you imagine at his age standing before a crowd like this and performing like Josiah did? Give it up for Josiah. That boy, future Harvard material, that's what I'm talking about. Tonight marks the 80th anniversary of the Anisfield Wolf Book Awards. The awards remain true to the original mandate of their founder, Cleveland poet and philanthropist Edith Anisfield Wolf, to contribute to our understanding of race and racism in our country. But I think dear Edith would be delighted, indeed amazed, to see how these awards have grown since their inception some 80 years ago, to embrace a broad concept of multiculturalism, diversity, and excellence. The awards have grown in tandem with the growth and diversity of our country. When Edith founded the awards, race in her experience was black and white, and racism took two forms: anti-black racism and anti-Semitism. While these hatreds haven't gone away, and they certainly weren't the only ones that existed at that time, the roots of and remedies for them are far better understood today than they were 80 years ago, in large part owing to the writers who have been recognized by the Anisfield Book Awards, a list that includes Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, Sholem Asch, Gilberto Freire, Wole Soyinka, Albert Murray, Toni Morrison, Maxine Hong Kingston, Jamaica Kincaid, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., just to name a few. Isn't that an amazing list, ladies and gentlemen? You see, you get the Anisfield Wolf Book Award, and then you get the Nobel Prize, so that's the way it happens. In the past several decades, our country has seen a marked increase in the numbers of people of Asian, African, and Latino descent. And this increase has been accompanied at times by an unfortunate, we might call it, digging in of those individuals or groups who see diversity of color and culture as a threat to their own identity. The 5 writers we recognize tonight join their distinguished predecessors because they have joined our country's great conversation about race, diversity, and difference, without fear, with courage and grace, and most importantly, with their magnificent words. There are 3 people whom I would like to acknowledge tonight. First of all, Mary Louise Hahn, who took a quiet but honorable prize and built it into a national event. Give it up for Mary Louise. Stand up, Mary Louise, stand up. Karen Long, who took over the management of this program from the irrepressible Mary Louise Hahn just a few years ago, and who brings to it an engagement and joy that are contagious and inspiring. Please stand up. Give it up for Karen Long. And last but not least, Ronald B. Richard, the president and CEO of the Cleveland Foundation, who always has the needs of the Cleveland community at the fore of his thinking and leadership, and who understands the rarest of things for the head of a foundation or a corporation, who understands that good literature nurtures the mind, and by extension, good literature nurtures social relations just as surely as food nourishes the body or foundation grants nourish social welfare. Give it up for Ron Richard. And now, on to the winners of the 2015 Anisfield Wolf Book Awards. First, Jericho Brown. We don't often find vampires and unicorns cohabiting with the legacy of slavery, Jericho. But such unexpected pairings, ladies and gentlemen, distinguish Jericho Brown's poetry from other verse that explores the implications of race and personhood in an increasingly boundaryless America. Jericho's second volume of poetry, The New Testament, shares this year's Anisfield Wolf Book Award for poetry. Here we have the narrator of Homeland from the New Testament. I knew I had jet lag because no one would make love to me. All the men thought me a vampire. All the women were women. But nobody named security ever believes me. Confiscated my Atripla, my cortisone, my Zyrtec, my Ambien. Nobody in this nation feels safe. And I'm still a reason why every day something gets thrown away on account of long history or hair or fingernails or, yes, of course, my fangs. In exploring the multiplicity of identities that he embodies as a black, gay man growing up in the South, Brown looks at the ways in which one facet of our personal, political, and social identities simultaneously enhances and implicates, supports, and undermines another. Alex Frankel in the Antioch Review says of this book, and I quote, "These poems work because while they emanate from an intimately personal place, social concerns loom large to merge the private with the public so seamlessly," he concludes, "is enviable." Brown's poetry contains the ambivalences and raw realities characterizing African American lives today. In the poem entitled Heart Condition, which is a meditation on the interplay of sex, sickness, and history, he writes, "I wander the other coast like any African American, Africa with its condition, and America with its condition, and black folk born in this nation, content to carry half of each." As the title of the whole collection suggests, questions of God, of scripted and scriptured lives, and of the institutions sacred and secular, Saturday night and Sunday morning, that define and confine us are central, recurrent themes throughout Brown's poetry, playing on the ear like leitmotifs in the improvised section of a jazz composition. Rita Dove, my best poetry teacher, and of course, one of our 5 jurors, writes of the New Testament, and I quote, "It's a beautiful book. The writing is direct and spare, at times unassuming, at times poignant, yet these elegantly modulated lyrics are shattering. Reading the New Testament," Rita continues, "was a reminder that outrage is a seductive disease. We would rather rage or weep than find a way to love in spite of the pain." And that's so true, isn't it? Brown's poems brim with love for this damaged world without letting the world off the hook. While his poems may be revelatory in a quiet and sometimes not quiet way, Rita Dove concludes, they never shrink from examining the wound, made more horrible by the gorgeous language used to express it. Claudine Rankin herself, a poet of the highest caliber, says, quote, "To read Jericho Brown's poem is to encounter devastating genius." And a reviewer on NPR, commenting on the volume's return to the stories of the New Testament as a baseline, says that Brown is rare in his chutzpah to rewrite the good book itself. And then there's that unicorn that I mentioned earlier. Fairy tale. Say the shame I see inching like steam along the streets will never seep beneath the doors of this bedroom. And if it does, if we dare to breathe, tell me that though the world ends us, lover, it cannot end our love of narrative. Don't you have a story for me, like the one you tell with fingers over my lips, to keep me from sighing when, before the queen is kidnapped, the prince bows to the enemy, handing over the horn of his favorite unicorn, like those men brought, bought, and whipped until they accepted their master's names. Jericho Brown is originally from Shreveport, Louisiana. He holds a bachelor's degree from Dillard, an MFA from the University of New Orleans, and a PhD from the University of Houston. For a time, he served as a speechwriter in the New Orleans mayor's office. His first book, Please, won the American Book Award. Brown has been honored with the Whiting Writers Award and fellowships from Bread Loaf, the Krakow Poetry Seminary in Poland, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard University. He is an assistant professor at Emory. The New Testament has already been honored with several awards: the Best Book of 2014 by the Library Journal, a Standout Book of 2014 by American Poetry Magazine, the Tom Gunn Award for Gay Poetry, and the Patterson Award for Literary Excellence. For his penetrating and elegant portrayal of the complexity of human identity in a digital, multicultural universe generally, and more specifically, ladies and gentlemen, the complexities of Black identity, encompassing the multiple and competing claims and denials of African American masculinity and personhood, Jericho Brown is the recipient of the Anisfield Book Award for Poetry.
I open my mouth unto the Lord, and I won't turn back. I will go, I shall go, to see what the end is going to be. My mom always told me that if I start by singing, I won't burst out crying. Thank you so much for those kind words, Dr. Gates. Thank you to this esteemed panel of judges. My idols sat around and read my book, y'all. It's really good to be back in Cleveland, back in Ohio. Ohio is a major birthplace of literature. It is where one of my favorite poets, James Wright, was born. It is where Anisfield Wolf winner, the novelist Toni Morrison, was born. It is where that wonder of the world we know as Rita Dove was born. So I am really proud to be included among this list of writers whose work has meant so much to my writing and to my life. And I am thrilled to share this night with Marilyn and with Marlon and with Richard and with David Bryan Davis. I'm going to share with you just a few poems from the New Testament. And I want to dedicate these poems to the memory of my mentor, who always told me that I indeed would enjoy nights like tonight. His name is Dr. Rudolph Byrd. Labor. I spent what light Saturday sent sweating, and learned to cuss cutting grass for women kind enough to say they couldn't tell the damned difference between their mowed lawns and their vacuumed carpets just before handing over a $5 bill rolled tighter than a joint and asking me in to change a few light bulbs. I called those women old because they wouldn't move out of a chair without my help. They wouldn't walk without a hand at the base of their backs. I called them old, and they must have been. They're all dead now, dead. And in the earth I once tended, the loneliest people have the earth to love, and not one friend their own age, only mothers to baby them, and big sisters to boss them around, women they want to please, and pray for the chance to say please to. I don't do that kind of work anymore. My job is to look at the childhood I hated and say, I once had something to do with my hands. This next poem is a persona poem, which is to say it is most definitely a poem written in a voice other than my own. This poem is, well, it's written in the voice of another poet, the poet I think of as my first poet. And I say that with the same affection that we say phrases like first love and first kiss. I remember being a kid in the library, coming across these poems and feeling as if I had fallen in love. The only things that you need to know before I read the poem is that it mentions his favorite singer, Bessie Smith, who is also known as the Empress of Blues. The poem also takes a quote from his testimony before the Senate Committee on Un-American Activities during McCarthyism and the Red Scare of the 1950s. And it's probably of good use for you to remember that this particular poet was the leading figure of that American literary movement known as the Harlem Renaissance. Oh, there's one more thing. He also wrote this poem that you may have heard of before. It's called The Negro Speaks of Rivers. When he wrote that poem, he was 18 years old, and he was leaving high school here in Cleveland. Every time I think about that, every time I think about Langston Hughes writing The Negro Speaks of Rivers when he was only 18 years old, every time I think about an 18-year-old writing a poem that great, I really hate Langston Hughes. So if he was here, he might say, Langston's Blues. O blood of the river of songs, O songs of the river of blood, let me lie down. Let my words lie sound in the mouths of men repeating invocations, pure and perfect as a moan that mounts in the mouth of Bessie Smith. Blues for the angels kicked out of heaven. Blues for the angels who miss them still. Blues for my people and what water they know. Oh, weary drinkers drinking from the bloody river. Why go to heaven with Harlem so close? Why sing of rivers with fathers of our own to miss. I remember mine and taste a stain like blood coursing the body of a man chased by a mob. I write his running, his sweat. Here he climbs a poplar for the sky, but it is only sky. The river? Follow me, you'll see. We tried to fly and learned we couldn't swim. Dear singing river full of my blood, are we as loud under water? Is it blood that binds brothers? Or is it the Mississippi running through the fattest vein of America? When I say home, I mean I wanted to write some lines. I wanted to hear the blues, but here I am, swimming the river again. What runs through the fat veins of a drowned body? What America can a body call home? When I say Congo, I mean blood. When I say Nile, I mean blood. When I say Euphrates, I mean if only you knew what blood we have in common. So much in Louisiana, they call a man like me red. And red was too dark for my daddy. And my daddy was too dark for America. He ran like a man from my mother and me. And my mother's sobs are the songs of Bessie Smith, who wears more feathers than death. Oh, the death my people refuse to die. When I was 18, I wrote down the river, though I couldn't win a race, climbed a tree that winter, then fell flat on my wet, red face, line after line. I read all the time, but there was nothing I could do about race. Heart condition. I don't want to hurt a man, but I like to hear one beg. Two people touch twice a month in 10 hotels, and we call it long distance. He holds down one coast. I wander the other, like any African American. Africa with its condition, and America with its condition. And black folk born in this nation content to carry half of each. I shoulder my share. My man flies to touch me. Sky on our side, sky above his world I wish to write, which is where I go wrong. Words are a sense of sound. I get smart. My mother shakes her head. My grandmother sighs. He ain't got no sense. My grandmother is dead. She lives with me. I hear my mother shake her head over the phone. Somebody cut the cord. We have a long-distance relationship. I lost half of her to a stroke. God gives to each a body. God gives everybody its pains. When pain mounts in my body, I try thinking of my white forefathers who hurt their black bastards quite legally. I hate to say it, but one pain can ease another. Doctors, rather I take pills. My man wants me to see a doctor. What are you when you leave your man wanting? What am I now that I think so fondly of airplanes? What's my name? Whose is it while we make love? My lover leaves me with words I wish to write, flies from one side of a nation to the outside of our world. I don't want the world. I only want African sense of American sound. Him touching this body, aware of its pains. Greetings, earthlings. My name is slow and stumbling. I come from planet Trouble. I am here to love you, uncomfortable. Thank you so much.
Fabulous. Give it up for Jericho Brown, please. Marilyn Chin. Language and culture meet at a crossroads, a word that, for blues people like me, suggests trade, exchange, bargaining, sacrifice, fate, and self-determination. I read Marilyn Chin's Hard Love Province, the co-winner of this year's Anisfield Wolf Book Award for Poetry, as living at such a meaningful, symbolic juncture, even as she writes out of a literary tradition different from the one with which I'm most familiar. The Black vernacular, for example, is characterized by its doubleness. It both absorbs and subverts the master's English that subjugated African peoples were compelled to adapt as their own. That doubleness, while it might lead to all kinds of amusing wordplay, is not to be confused with complicitous self-abnegation. The doubleness of Chin's own vernacular, her very own poetic diction, poses a pronounced challenge both to the listener and to the reader. In Cougar Synonymous, she writes, "Hell no, dude, bro. You think you own this poetry? I see your lips trembling, counting syllables, cry epiphany, long before the penultimate burn, a dry cough, and a verse smears the ceiling." You're so bad, Marilyn. Rita Dove, a poet no less challenging than Adrienne Rich, one of Chin's own mentors, called Chin's poetry powerful, uncompromising, and unerring. Dove, whom I quote for the second time in my poetry citations, describes this volume as caustic and icy yet inflamed. Rita goes on, and I quote, "Chin's edgy, discomforting elegies incorporate both Eastern and Western poetic traditions to mourn the loss of the beloved in a world inured to suffering, a world where, in Chin's words, Pol Pot sleeps counting heaven's lambs, while a pretty boy dances naked in a cage." A seemingly innocuous lyric in the tradition of classical Chinese court poetry is met by the chilled breath of genocide. "Heaven is our starry canopy, my love. Earth is our eternal bed. Let us drift in our cold black railroad car and wake to empire again." And she certainly doesn't shy away from our own societal and personal ills. Race relations in the age of Obama are a complicated business, Dove writes, whether muddled through by school children, as in her poem Study Hall, or deterritorialized, or waged on the national soapbox, Black President. And when in these sad and beautiful poems, Rita Dove concludes, a withering portrayal of our global society emerges, it is never didactic nor formulaic. I told you earlier that Rita Dove was my best poetry teacher. I would add that even as Chin laments, she heals. Even as she protests and berates, she disarms. As she bemoans the violent treatment of women, she evokes sisterhood. With biting sarcasm and caustic tone, just two of the weapons in her rhetorical arsenal, she makes individual despair an allegory for society's ills in a larger process of unifying opposites, formally joining East with West, thematically conflating life with death, as of course they always are. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, Chin signifies upon the traditional boundaries between languages and cultures. She inflects received concepts and categories with a vision of meaningful hidden connection. These function as subversive responses to despair and human suffering, the kind of suffering we, human beings, inflict upon each other, and the kind handed to us from above. Marilyn Chin was born in Hong Kong and raised in Portland. In addition to Hard Love Province, she's the author of the novel Revenge of the Mooncake Vixen and the poetry collections Rhapsody in Plain Yellow, The Phoenix Gone, The Terrace Empty, and Dwarf Bamboo. She has received many honors, including the United Artists Foundation Fellowship, the Radcliffe Institute Fellowship at Harvard, the Rockefeller Foundation Fellowship at Bellagio, 2 NEA grants, the Stegner Fellowship, Lannan Foundation Fellowships, the Penn Josephine Miles Award, 5 Pushcart Prizes, and a Fulbright Fellowship to Taiwan. She's one of the most prominent poets writing today, and her work is contained in a wide variety of anthologies. She's been featured on Bill Moyer's PBS program, The Language of Life. In addition to being a much lauded poet, she's also an accomplished translator, having translated the works of the Chinese writer Ah Ching and the Japanese Gozo Yoshimatsu into English. For forging a poetics of resistance and recovery out of her irreverent and wholly humane examination of fortune and misfortune, both personal and political, Marilyn Chin is the recipient of this year's Anisfield Wolf Book Award for Poetry.
Oh, I have tears in my eyes. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Skip. Skip Gates, who chased me down in Hong Kong to give me the good news. And I want to thank Rita Dove for her sisterhood, for taking care of us impoverished poets, take us out of the margins. And Karen Long, of course, thank you and your posse for taking care of us. And thank you, Madam Anisfield Wolf, for your great vision. I am forever grateful. I turned 60 this year. Don't tell anybody. And this is the best present ever. And this award validates and celebrates my lifelong work and struggle as an activist poet. It's so hard to be an activist poet in this world, right? In the poetry world. And this has been, Hard Love Province was a difficult book in that in the last 15 years, I lost 2 boyfriends, my mother and my grandmother. So it was a difficult book for me to write. It was grounded by elegy and some sexy haiku and weird stuff for the wild women out there, right? So I want to begin with a blues poem inspired by Langston Hughes and Bessie Smith. It's called Blues on Yellow. And what can I say? I was inspired by these blues poets, and I bring into it Chinese American immigrant immigration history, and one drop of yellow blood. The canary died in the gold mine. Her dreams got lost in the sieve. The canary died in the gold mine. Her dreams got lost in the sieve. Her husband, the crow, killed under the railroad. The spokes has shorn his wings. Something's cooking in Chin's kitchen. 10,000 yellow-bellied sapsuckers baked in a pie. Something's cooking in Chin's kitchen. 10,000 yellow-bellied sapsuckers baked in a pie. Something's cooking in Chin's kitchen. Die, die, yellow bird, die, die. Oh, crack an egg on the griddle. Yellow will ooze into white. Oh, crack an egg on the griddle. Yellow will ooze into white. Run, run, sweet little Puritan. Yellow will ooze into white. If you cut my yellow wrists, I'll teach my yellow toes to write. If you cut my yellow wrists, I'll teach my yellow toes to write. If you cut my yellow fists, I'll teach my yellow feet to fight. Do not be afraid to perish, my mother. Buddha's compassion is nigh. Do not be afraid to perish, my mother. Our boat will sail tonight. Your babies will reach the promised land. The stars will be their guide. I am so mellow yellow, mellow yellow. Buddha sings in my veins. I am so mellow yellow, mellow yellow. Buddha sings in my veins. Oh, take me to the land of the unreborn. There's no life on earth without pain. Thank you. This one is for my lovely students in California. I want to celebrate the diverse communities in California. One child has brown eyes. One child has brown eyes. One has blue. One slanted, another rounded. One so nearsighted he squints internal. One had her extra epicantic folds removed. One downcast, one couldn't be bothered. One roams the heavens for a perfect answer. One transfixed like a dead doe, a convex mirror. One shines double-edged like a poisoned dagger. Understand their vision. Understand their blindness. Understand their vacuity. Understand their mirth. Thank you. I shall end with this one. This is called Black President. I don't believe that we've written enough poems for our dear beleaguered Black president. So please go home and write a poem for him, right? And I call this a Hapa sonnet. That is half sonnet, half lyric, Chinese lyric. Black president. If a black man could be president, could a white man be his slave? Could a sinner enter heaven by uttering his name? If the Terminator is my governor, He was my governor. Okay. can't believe it. Okay. Could a cowboy be my king? When shall the cavalry enter Deadwood and save my prince? An exo-cannibal eats her enemies. An endo-cannibal eats her friends. I'd rather starve myself silly than to make amends. Blood on the altar, blood on the lamb, blood in the chalice, not symbolic, but fresh. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Give it up for Marilyn Chin, ladies and gentlemen. Marlon James. The adjectives alone that cascade through the reviews of Marlon James's novel, A Brief History of Seven Killings, can make one's head spin. Dizzying, exploding, crazy quilt, immersive, and monumental. And from a single review by the New York Times great critic Michiko Kakutani, raw, dense, violent, scalding, darkly comic, exhilarating, and exhausting, casually profane, and as kinetic and syncopated as music. To this, let me add another adjective with the neurological bent. The experience of reading A Brief History of Seven Killings, this year's winner of the Anisfield Wolf Book Award in Fiction, is vertiginous. It's a big book, and one feels as if she or he is falling through it, both held and tossed about by a narrative whose jumping off points are the attempted assassination of Bob Marley, referred to throughout the book as the singer, an event that, with the deft hand of the necromancer, ties together ghosts, rival Jamaican political parties, the CIA, romantic messes, and the urban U.S. love affair with crack. No less a novelist than Joyce Carol Oates, like Rita, another of our judges, called the novel astonishing. She said, "It's something of a whirlwind, a novel of voices. Indeed, dozens of characters speak in different voices. And James's gift is to bring them all into the service of the story without letting any one of them dominate it. The Guardian calls it a novel of cacophony, and with very good reason. The unfiltered patois of the Jamaican gang member, the keen observation cum paranoia of the CIA agent, the elevated musings of the ghost of a prominent local politician, the cool nerd objectivity of the rock journalist. These voices and different levels of diction, combined with all of the other sharply drawn and distinctly heard voices, to carry us along in a narrative that is at once earthy and magical, casting about in glorious multiplicity and disarray, but always grounding us in a common point of origin. In a lovely passage, yes, ladies and gentlemen, there are many lovely lyrical passages in this book, as well as lovely cacophonous passages in this book. James writes, and I quote, "But in another city, another valley, another ghetto, another slum, another favela, another township, another intifada, another war, another birth, somebody is singing redemption song, as if the singer wrote it for no other reason but for this sufferer to sing, shout, whisper, weep, bawl, and scream right here, right now." James embraces a post-Faulknerian, postmodern fundamental in A Brief History of Seven Killings. In an interview with the LA Times, he said that, quote, "Truth keeps shifting. 5, 6 stories, even contradictory stories, can exist at the same time. And they're kind of all true and all false. There is no one story," unquote. This shifting ground also characterizes post-colonial literature. But he refers to himself as post-colonial, meaning, as he said in an interview with NPR, that he is part of, quote, "a newish generation of writers where we're not driven by our dialogue with the former mother country. The hovering power for us when growing up in the 70s and 80s wasn't the UK, it was the states, it was America, and it wasn't an imperialistic power, it was just a cultural influence. This sentiment marks a profound departure from his West Indian literary forebears, such as V.S. Naipaul, let's say, at one extreme, and George Lamming, Wilson Harris, Jamaica Kincaid, or Derek Walcott at the other extreme. James identifies his own literary models for this book as Faulkner, Don DeLillo, and James Ellroy. And although he's reportedly tired of comparisons between his book and Quentin Tarantino's films, let me say that as a fan of both, they share a similar and influential sensibility, the search for individual identity in a landscape powered by fast-flying and omnivorous cultural references. Marlon James was born in Kingston, Jamaica in 1970 to a detective mother and a policeman-turned-lawyer father. In his words, he was part of the first generation in Jamaica to exist apart from their planter or slave roots. He did an undergraduate degree at the University of the West Indies and took his MFA at Wilkes University. He now teaches writing at Macalester and is the master writer in residence at the California College of Arts MFA writing program. A Brief History of Seven Killings is his third novel, and he's currently at work on an adaptation for HBO with the lauded screenwriter Eric Roth. A Brief History follows his acclaimed first novel, John Crow's Devil, and the even more acclaimed The Book of Night Women, which won the 2010 Dayton Literary Prize, the Minnesota Book Award, and was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award in Fiction and the coveted NAACP Image Award. It has received overwhelmingly glowing reviews from all corners of the journalistic landscape, from the New York Times to the Financial Times, and all points in between, and landed squarely on at least 20 Best Books of the Year lists. No book this fall is more impressive, wrote Publishers Weekly. Long-listed for the Man Booker Prize, the book received the 2015 American Book Award, the Minnesota Book Award, and the OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature. And it was a finalist for the NBCC Award for Fiction. His short fiction has appeared in Esquire, the New York Times Magazine, Granta, Harper's, and the Caribbean Review. A Brief History of Seven Killings is, as one critic said, literature working. For this novel, ladies and gentlemen, that interrogates the shifting questions of race and class and how race and class create, inflect, and dismantle identity from both on high and down low, and for giving us multiple languages by which to share in this process of interrogation, Marlon James is the recipient of the Anisfield Book Award for Fiction.
Wow, I was thinking just on the way over here, Zora Neale, Edwidge, August, Tony, Juno, Louise, Arnold, Isabel, Woolley. My whole life has been shaped by Anisfield Wolf winners. my entire sensibility. Last night I was talking about, me and Jericho were having our Toni Morrison moment. And I was talking about Sula. And there are two Toni Morrison novels that are very, very important to me. Song of Solomon, because I still can't believe a human wrote that. And Sula, and there's a scene in Sula where Sula is on her deathbed, spoiler alert. And Sula is talking about how she experienced life, and she did this and she did that. And Nell said, yeah, but what do you have to show for it? And I closed the book there, because I'm like, yeah, what do you have to show for it? I really wanted to know, because, I was at this point in my life where I couldn't really figure out what my life was. I was like, yeah, what do you have to show for it? And I opened it again, and Sula says, show to who? And I don't have a lot of eureka fall off the chair moments, but that was a eureka fall off the chair moment. My entire life changed in that sentence. Because then I realized I don't owe anything to anyone. I didn't have anything to prove. I could be the writer, I could be the artist, I could be the person that I want. And I also give myself a time limit when I talk about Sula, because I do burst out in tears. So I'm going to stop right there. The thing about Tony and quite a few of the Anisfield Wolf winners is, as Skip Gates was talking about, there were blues people. It was black arts. It was this sort of lightning bolt in the middle of my British colonial education. And I was raised, with Dickens as a contemporary, and I love Dickens. But the idea that voices that sounded like my own, or voices from people who look like me, could be considered legitimate was just mind-blowing. I couldn't believe half of the thrill of reading The Color Purple was the whole idea of, I can't believe I'm reading this. And not the content, but the voice and the jazz and the language. And it was such a liberating moment, which is why I am so humbled to be among them and so humbled to be presented this prize. And I thank the Anisfield Wolf judges. I thank Cleveland. It's the first time I've been back in 10 years. And just, everybody who sort of responded to this. This is in a lot of ways the craziest book I've ever written, in the sense that it was the first time I was writing a book without a preconceived notion of what a book should be. And that can be really scary for a writer, because you're walking without, you're doing a tightrope walk without a net. So to be acknowledged and to be honored is actually pretty humbling and pretty, actually kind of scary. I'm going to read two sections from this book, pretty brief. There are quite a few characters in my book, including a ghost. And the two sections I'm reading are both concerning Bob Marley's death and the aftermath. Most of the scenes and the characters in this book are off in their own worlds. Nobody really addresses him directly. And in these sections, the only character who addresses him just happens to be a ghost. It says, "You collapse in Pittsburgh. It's never a good thing hearing doctors talk using words that end with Oma. The Oma has hopped, skipped, and jumped from your foot to your liver, lungs, and brain. In Manhattan, they blast you with radium, and your locks drop and scatter. You go to Miami, then Mexico, to the clinic that couldn't save Steve McQueen. Somebody's driving you through Bavaria, near the Austrian border. A hospital sprouting out of the forest like magic. Hills in the background tipped with snow like cake icing. You meet the tall and frosty Bavarian, the man who helps the hopeless. He smiles, but his eyes are set too far back, and they vanish in the shadow of his brow. Cancer is a red alert that the whole body is in danger, he says. Thank God the food he forbids, Rastafari had forbidden long time. A sunrise is a promise. But the Bavarian bows out. Nobody speaks of hope, nobody speaks of anything. You are in Miami, with no memory of the flight. May 11, eyes open, you're the first one up, just like old times. But all you see are old woman's hands, overrun with black veins and bony, jutting kneecaps. A plastic machine with veins pushed into your skin, doing all the living for you. You already feel like sleep, probably from all the drugs, but this one comes on like a creeper, and you already know that from wherever you go this time, there is no coming back. Something coming from out the window, something like that Stevie Wonder tune, Master Blaster. In New York City and in Kingston, both skies blazing bright with noon white, thunder breaks out and a lightning bolt slashes across the clouds. Summer lightning, 3 months too early. The woman waking up in Manhattan and the woman sitting on the porch in Kingston both know you're gone. 4 priests cover their faces with lightning, speaking a liturgy nobody out in the congregation knows. Every disciple wrote a testament, but not every testament is in the Bible. A man says to a woman who does not understand, 10 seats down, 30 seats across in the National Arena, the singer's funeral. Gospel and heresy go in a dogfight over the body. Rastaman chants from Corinthians, even though the elders told him to speak from Psalms, and all 10 sit while he calls a king God, heresy. The Ethiopian archbishop says, Why go to Africa when it would profit you more to work together for a better life in Jamaica? The Rastafarians seethe and cuss. The Archbishop came with weapons too. Every Rastafarian wants to wake up in Shashimaniland, 500 acres of land bestowed by a deposed emperor. Defiant Rastas shout, Ja Rastafari. Only a few asking, why is this an Ethiopian Orthodox funeral when the singer was Rasta? Hundreds sit, stand, and watch. The old Prime Minister, still beloved by the sufferers, sits still, hunched over in loss. The new Prime Minister sits until called up. He gives a eulogy for a man he barely knew, but closes with a benediction. May his soul find rest in the arms of Jah Rastafari. Gospel versus heresy, heresy wins. How do you bury a man? Put him in the ground or stomp out his fire? They give the singer an honor on his deathbed, the Order of Merit. The black revolutionary joins the order of British squires and knights, Babylon in excelsis Deo. A fire that lights up Zimbabwe, Angola, Mozambique, and South Africa, doused out by two letters, O and M. Now he's one of us, but the singer is sly. In time, people will see that he prophesied over this very thing, singing of the false honor before it was even bestowed, before the sickness took him. I hear him sing in his sleep about Negro soldiers in America, Black American soldiers of the 24th and 25th Infantry and the 9th and 10th Cavalry under the command of the Paleface to butcher Comanche, Kiowa, Sioux, Cheyenne, Ute, and Apache. 14 black men in dirty boots take the Medal of Honor for killing a people and an idea. The Indians call them Buffalo Soldiers. The Medal of Honor, the Order of Merit, the same sounds flipped. Meanwhile, I see the singer coming in and going out on the top right side of parcels and letters. All this time, the man who killed me still will not die. Instead, he rots. I watch him as his secretary touches his white cap, teeming with veins like little blue snakes, and washing his thin hair in black dye. His new wife will not touch his stuff. It ruins her fingertips and blackens her nail polish. You sure you don't want a little grain at Mr. P? Make it look young but a little more natural. More want it black, you hear me? More want it black. The PNP ran his party out of power, but he dresses every morning as if heading to work. Such a strange decade. It looks nothing like the 70s, and he's lost with nobody speaking his language. His party's thugs no longer want him, and thinkers never needed him, so now he shouts against communism and socialism, his jowls swinging like a rooster. I watch him while he walks to the car, forgetting for the third time this week he's no longer allowed to drive. He trips on the garden hose and falls hard on the concrete. The fall knocks the wind out of him, killing any hope of a scream, shout, or sob. He lies there for nearly an hour before the cooking woman sees him in the kitchen window. New hip, new pacemaker, new pills to deal with the wife, who had gotten used to him flop on top of her, still like a slug. He laughs at death, at me. I watch the man who visits him once a night. He's fatter too. In the ghettos abroad, people sniff, cook, boil, and inject. Colombia, Jamaica, Bahamas, Miami. It's an amazing scenario. We see murders everywhere. DC, Detroit, New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. Buy guns, sell powder. When building monsters, don't be surprised when they become monstrous. In New York, the headline type is an inch thick. Jamaican who got the city hooked on crack. 3 killers have outlived the singer. One dies in New York. One sees and waits in Kingston surrounded by money and cocaine. And one vanishes behind the Iron Curtain where he sits knowing, waiting for that bullet to the head soon. 3 girls from Kashmir sling on bass, guitar, and drums. Fresh faces brimming out of burqas, propped up and held together by a backdrop of the singer, streaked out in red, green, and gold stripes, thick like pillars. They call themselves First Ray of Light, soul sisters to the singer, smiling with the rising sun. Out of her rapt face comes a melody so fragile it almost vanishes in the air, but it lands on a drum that kicks the groove back up where the song lingers and soothes. Now the singer is a balm to spread over broken countries. Soon the men who kill girls issue a holy order, and boys all over the valley vow to clean their guns, to hold down and take away. The singer is support, but he cannot shield, and the band breaks away. but in another city, another valley, another ghetto, another slum, another favela, another township, another intifada, another war, another birth, somebody singing redemption song, as if the singer wrote it for no other reason but for this sufferer to sing, shout, whisper, weep, bawl, and scream right here, right now. Thank you so much.
Marlon James, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. Talk about poetry, huh? Blessed is the seed of the ganja weed in the house of Jah, Rastafari. Blessed is the pipe that is always light. May your creative pipe, my brother, always be light. Give it up for Marlon James, please. Richard Dunn. If during the long, agonizing centuries in which slavery dominated the New World's landscape, you found yourself born, bought, or sold as another man or woman's property, it was a virtual certainty that you would spend your years in toil for someone else, only to be forgotten by history. With no legal name and no legal birth date, and with none of the hallmarks of citizenship, it would be, ladies and gentlemen, as if you had never existed. This aspect of non-existence was one of the most pernicious realities of human bondage, an all-encompassing system as harsh as it was totalizing in its attempts at the erasure of Black human subjectivity. This year's recipient of the Anisfield Wolf Book Award for Nonfiction, Richard Dunn, undertook 40 years of painstaking research that set out to rescue as many slaves' lives as possible from this historical oblivion and return them to the historical record. He did this using documents from two starkly different places, the Mesopotamia Sugar Estate in Jamaica and the Mount Airy Plantation in Tidewater, Virginia. He did it using documents that at first seemed highly impersonal, and then, applying his mathematical and highly imaginative mind, he drew out from them the biographical arcs of some 2,000 heretofore anonymous, faceless, invisible, Black enslaved human beings. What an astonishing act of recreation. In his prize-winning book, A Tale of Two Plantations, Slave Life and Labor in Jamaica and Virginia, Dunn digs deeply into the archives to reconstruct the lives and collective experiences of 3 generations of enslaved human beings in Jamaica and Virginia. And in doing so, he reveals, in absorbing detail, the alternate form slavery took in these 2 Atlantic world settings. The result, historian Greg Grandin writes in his New York Times review, and I quote, is a substantial achievement. The contrasts between the 2 slave societies were many, covering family life, religious beliefs, and labor practices. But one difference, he continues, overrode all others. In the Caribbean, white masters treated the slaves like disposable cogs in a machine, working them to death on sugar plantations and then replacing them with fresh stock from Africa. In the United States, white masters treated their slaves like the machine itself, a breeding machine, unquote. The Yale historian Edward Rugemeyer hails Dunn's masterpiece as, quote, the first book to describe with vivid detail the lived realities of the radically different slave societies of the Caribbean and North America. By illuminating, he continues, the family lives of enslaved people, Dunn has breathed life into the old account books that listed people as nothing but property. Richard Dunn earned his undergraduate degree at Harvard College in 1950 before taking his master's and PhD in history at Princeton in 1952 and 1955, respectively. After teaching first at Princeton, then at Michigan, he joined the faculty at Penn, where he trained new generations of historians, ladies and gentlemen, for the next 39 years. Not least of all, Harvard's president, the eminent historian Drew Gilpin Faust, and founded the Philadelphia Center for Early American Studies, now called the McNeil Center. He retired in 1996 as the Roy F. and Jeanette P. Nichols Professor of American History. Before Two Plantations, Dunn's contributions to the field of early American history were already quite remarkable. His publications included historical biographical studies of early New England, the Age of Religious Wars, 1559-1715, and the highly acclaimed and influential Sugar and Slaves, the rise of the planter class in the English West Indies, 1624-1713. His numerous honors and awards include a Guggenheim, an American Council of Learned Societies Fellowship, an appointment as a fellow at the Queen's College at the University of Oxford, and the Lindback Teaching Award at the University of Pennsylvania. In assessing the significance of Two Plantations, my Harvard colleague Vincent Brown says that, quote, its meticulous research, its considered analysis, and its unparalleled authority on the subject have set a new benchmark for histories of Anglo-American slavery. Vincent Brown had the opportunity to work on this project with Dunn by creating a website for the book, a website that allows the reader to engage in an entirely new way with the research. In facilitating this innovative project, after an already storied career, Dunn has indeed set a new standard, both archival and digital, for all practitioners in the field. I have refrained from using the word magisterial to describe this book, as sometimes it seems that this word has become the default adjective for any book longer than 300 pages. But Two Plantations virtually demands, ladies and gentlemen, that this word be used. And I'm pleased to say that two of our jurors, Joyce Carol Oates and Steven Pinker, agree with me on this and offered that very word to describe it, and rightly so. Steve Pinker was succinct and spot on in his evaluation, and I quote, Dunn's book is about human beings from beginning to end. About her sense of the book's open ending, Oates wrote, and I quote, though it's dense and long, it did not seem repetitive. It is refreshing to encounter an historian who doesn't include a forced conclusion. Here Dunn says, my story has no proper conclusion because it stops where my records run out. Yet Dunn has left us with a story and a history that will last through the ages, ladies and gentlemen, and that henceforward will contribute enormously to defining our understanding of the brutal trade that shaped the history of this, our new Western world. Indeed, our very American history. For this peerless book of subjective reconstruction, it is my enormous pleasure and honor to present Professor Richard Dunn with the Anisfield Book Award for Nonfiction.
Ladies and gentlemen, when I looked at the list of former Anisfield Wolf Award nonfiction award winners, I found that this list included Martin Luther King Jr. and Gunnar Myrdal. And I said to myself, what am I doing here? How can I possibly be on this list? Then I realized, looking further, it included a wonderful collection of historians, biographers, sociologists, anthropologists, political scientists, who all contributed in ways that I appreciate. And it makes me very proud to be part of that company. Thank you. Now, you've heard three people making wonderful readings of their works. I couldn't figure out any way to take 10 minutes of my book and make any sense of it at all. So I've decided instead to talk about it. I hope you'll indulge me. Would you like to know how I got started on this book? It happened 41 years ago, in 1974 in Oxford, England, when I visited the Bodleian Library looking for plantation records about slave life. I opened a big box and saw dozens of inventories listing the slaves at a Jamaica sugar plantation named Mesopotamia. I pulled out an inventory dated January the 31st, 1792, to see what information it contained. 383 people were listed on this inventory by name, age, occupation, and condition. A slave named Affy was 25 years old. Her occupation was field, and her condition was able. Just above her on the list of women was Anna, age 43, a field cook whose condition was consumptive. And a little way down the page was Benaba, age 71, with no occupation, who was infirm and very sickly. I saw at once that if this list could be connected chronologically to the many other slave lists, I might be able to trace these three women and all of the other Mesopotamia slaves year by year over a long time period and try to bring them to life. When I arranged the Mesopotamia inventories in sequence, I saw that there were many more slave deaths than births, and that the dead slaves were replaced by hundreds of new workers. And I was also able to uncover the biographies of these three women, Affy, Anna, and Benaba, and all of the other Mesopotamia slaves. Affy interested me particularly once I got to know something about her, because she had 6 children, 4 black babies fathered by an unidentified black man or men, and 2 mulatto babies fathered by a white bookkeeper. I was curious to know how mixed-race children fared at Mesopotamia, and in my book, I have a 30-page chapter on Affy and her family. But Anna and Benaba had their own stories to tell. Anna turned out to be an African girl who came to Jamaica on a slave ship at age 14. Think about that. She came alone, doubtless, no family member. She worked on the first field gang in her early 20s, but then rather quickly became infirm and was moved to the second field gang. At age 30, Anna contracted tuberculosis, and she was given the job of cooking meals for the field workers, a rather odd occupation, until she died at age 43. Like half of the other women at Mesopotamia, Anna was childless. Now, our third woman, Benaba, was another African who was brought to Mesopotamia in her late 20s and labored in the first field gang like Anna. By age 40, Benaba was an invalid, incapacitated by ulcers. And for the next 32 years, she only worked occasionally, sometimes as a grass cutter, sometimes as a hog herder, until she died at age 72. Beneba was also an early member of the Moravian Church at Mesopotamia. In her old age, she lost one of the hogs she was herding. And the missionaries learned that the overseer threatened to give her a terrible whipping unless she recovered it. So she prayed to Jesus for help, and she found the hog. Beneba had one child, a sickly son named George, who was also baptized by the Moravians, and he died at age 33, much earlier than his mother. The Mesopotamia lists contain hundreds of other hidden biographies like these ones, each with its own story. Now, after discovering these Mesopotamia records in Oxford, I set about trying to find a similar set for a U.S. plantation. And at the Virginia Historical Society in Richmond, I was delighted to find a long series of inventories for Mount Airy Plantation, in which the people are annually listed by name, location, age, occupation, and value. The first complete Mount Airy inventory, dated January the 1st, 1809, lists 382 people. And location is important because 106 of these people lived at the home plantation and 276 lived on 8 different farm quarters. Studying this list, I noticed that the women had much bigger families than at Mesopotamia. At Doctors Hall Farm Quarter, for instance, a field hand named Sally, who was age 29 in 1809, was valued at 70 pounds, and she had 5 young children, the oldest of whom was 8 years old. When I traced Sally through the Mount Airy inventories, I discovered that she bore 8 more children. Sally was a field hand until age 52, then occasionally worked as a cook and nurse, and she died at age 63. When I traced her family members to the end of slavery, I identified 114 people in 5 generations, and my hand-drawn chart of her family tree is 5 feet long. That's where Skip Gates's colleague Vincent Brown became so important to me, because he could figure out, I knew that I couldn't possibly reproduce a 5-foot family tree in a book, but he said, why not put up a website? And so we did. And Sally's family tree is on it. 6 members of Sally's family were sold, 27 were made to walk 800 miles to work at their owner's cotton plantation in Alabama, and another 17 were sent to Alabama during the Civil War. After emancipation, I found 51 members of Sally's family in the U.S. Census of 1870. And 48 of these people were living in Alabama, and only 3 in Virginia. On the website that accompanies my book, there are many biographies of Sally and her husband, her 13 children, and their 99 known descendants and marriage partners. You can easily look them all up by Googling twoplantations.com. It's pretty easy, twoplantations.com. All one word. Why compare slave life at Mesopotamia with slave life at Mount Airy? The most obvious difference between the two places is demographic. I've already hinted at that, and so has Skip Gates. The Mesopotamia population was constantly shrinking, which was standard throughout the Caribbean, and the Mount Airy population was constantly expanding, which was standard throughout the Old South. This made slavery in the Caribbean islands very different from slavery in the USA. In both regions, the enslaved people suffered terribly, but in strikingly dissimilar ways. To keep Mesopotamia operable, the slaveholders brought in many new workers, some from the African slave ships, some from local plantations in Jamaica that were going under. The slaves were thrown together in an environment in which ill health and death dictated the course of events. But at Mount Airy, by contrast, the slaveholders had many hundreds of surplus slaves, and they moved these laborers to distant work sites, or they sold them to new owners. The slaves at Mount Airy lived in an environment in which normal social relations were impossible because families were routinely ripped apart. It has taken me 40 years to write this book because it's no simple matter to portray 2,000 people living in two very different slave communities over a long time. But I have unearthed much unexpected information about slave life and labor. My book discusses the demographic pattern, labor pattern, role of motherhood, family formation, racial mixing on both plantations. It shows how replacement slaves were moved into Mesopotamia and how surplus slaves were moved out of Mount Airy. It shows how the Mesopotamia people interacted with the Moravian missionaries who maintained a Christian congregation on this plantation through the whole time that I study it. And my book follows the 218 Mount Airy people who were moved 800 miles from Virginia to Alabama. It investigates resistance and rebellion on both plantations, and it shows how the Mesopotamia people responded to the biggest Jamaican slave rebellion in 1831-32, and how the Mount Airy people responded to the U.S. Civil War. My final chapter deals with slave emancipation in 1834 at Mesopotamia, and 31 years later, 1865 at Mount Airy. Once again, there is a strong contrast. The Mesopotamia ex-slaves soon quit their sugar estate and freed themselves from white control. Many of them bought small plots of unoccupied land and became independent peasant farmers. But the Mount Airy people couldn't do this because they were unable to secure land of their own. In 1865, most of them were living in Alabama, and 2/3 of these people quickly left the cotton plantations where they had been enslaved. But by 1870, a great many of them had returned, the census shows this, to work on their old plantations as sharecroppers. This was not out of any love for their former owners, but because they needed to band together in community solidarity against white mob violence. And it's this point that my story stops because my records run out. I part company with the Mesopotamia people and the Mount Airy people just as they were entering into a new life with the death of slavery and the birth of freedom. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Spectacular.
You want to try it? No, I'll be all right about it.
Okay. Give it up for Richard Dunn, ladies and gentlemen. Now that is a scholar. 40 years. You know, the slave trade is so amazing. There's one takeaway. You go home and tell your family the following. Thanks to the work of a group of scholars under the direction of David Eltis, we have something called the Transatlantic Slave Trade Database. You can go home and, just like twoplantations.com, you can look it up. And by the way, you all can buy everybody's books who honored tonight outside when we get finished. You don't have to just get them on the internet, okay? And between, say, 1501 and 1866, scholars have actually counted over, using the records of over 36,000 voyages. 12.5 million Africans were shipped to the New World between the early 16th century and the middle of the 19th century. But here's the takeaway. 15% die in the Middle Passage. So about 10.6 million get off the boats in the New World. How many come to the United States? How many come to the United States? 10.6 million Africans arrive in the New World. Take a guess. How many come to the United States? You say half? 5 million, is that a good guess? Over here? More? Over there? 388,000. 388,000. And another 70,000 come via the Caribbean. Out of 10.6 million Africans shipped to the New World between 1501 and the middle of the 19th century, only 450,000, Otis Moss, came to the United States. 1 million went to Jamaica, Marlon. 770,000 went to Saint-Domingue, which is now Haiti. 779,000 went to Cuba. Almost 5 million went to Brazil. In those societies, the slaves were cogs in the machine. They were worked to death. And when the cog expired, they were replaced. Isn't that remarkable? And in this country, the slaves were bred and grown. So the 42 million African Americans today descend, more or less, from those original 450,000 people. It's just the story that you'd ever heard. And Richard Dunn is one of the people who brings those statistics home. Give it up one more time for Richard Dunn. Finally, it's my pleasure to present the Anisfield Wolf Lifetime Achievement Award to my dear friend, David Brion Davis. The Anisfield Wolf Lifetime Achievement Award goes to David Brion Davis, an historian who has not only broken new ground in the field of American history, but who has also entirely reshaped old debates and altered the very way we remember and interpret the past. His career has spanned the presidencies of Dwight D. Eisenhower and Barack Obama, the earliest days of the Civil Rights Movement, and the emergent strains of Black Lives Matter. His work has placed slavery, the trade, the institution, its ideological underpinnings, its ultimate demise, at the center of the American epic, and indeed at the center of Western civilization itself over the past 500 years. Our religious and thought traditions, our cultural institutions, and political economies, our struggles, both philosophical and bloody, over mass dehumanization and human rights. Davis's journey to this point began when he was drafted into the United States Army at the age of 18 and found himself on a troop ship bound for Europe in 1945, where, to his shock, horror, and dismay, he discovered African-American soldiers squeezed into a lower level of the ship, segregated into what he said he, quote, imagined a slave ship would look like. The treatment he witnessed of African-American troops in Germany was not a marked improvement over those conditions of their transport. When he returned from the service, David Davis attended Dartmouth and Harvard, where as a doctoral student in the early 1950s, he began a career that looked at the question he had first encountered in the United States Army. What would victory abroad in World War II mean if it was not accompanied by meaningful progress here at home? His examination of moral questions answered over time, along with thought and action resulting in historical change, drive the three foundational books of his career, and, we might say, of the field of American intellectual history. And those books are The Problem of Slavery in Western Culture, published in 1966, The Problem of Slavery in the Age of Revolution, published in 1975, and The Problem of Slavery in the Age of Emancipation, published in 2014. Taken together, they try to solve the vexing problem of how an institution as inhumane and as violent as slavery could endure for thousands of years through the biblical age, through the Renaissance and the ages of exploration, through the Enlightenment, until in its race-based form, it died at its economic peak in the 100 years between the American Revolution and its final abolition in Brazil, only as recently as 1888. The confluence of characters, events, and geographies Davis dissected, from revolution on Saint-Domingue and Haitian independence to the colonization movement, which was the attempt to relocate free black people back to Africa, as we say, to the increasing primacy of black abolitionists determined to put an end both to colonization and to the peculiar institution, as slavery was euphemistically called, was simply breathtaking. It also rendered much of the scholarship that came before it outdated and even obsolete. The first two volumes are among the most highly lauded of any historical texts in the past half-century. The Problem of Slavery in Western Culture earned David Brian Davis the 1967 Pulitzer Prize for General Nonfiction. The Problem of Slavery in the Age of Revolution won the 1976 National Book Award and the Bancroft Prize. And last year, The Problem of Slavery in the Age of Emancipation won the 2014 National Book Critics Circle Award. Also last year, Davis was awarded the National Humanities Medal, which the President just presented this afternoon. On presenting him with the medal, President Obama credited David Davis with, quote, reshaping our understanding of history, and added, a World War II veteran, Dr. Davis has shed light on the contradiction of a free nation built by forced labor, and his examinations of slavery and abolitionism drive us to keep making moral progress in our time, unquote. David Davis has written numerous other books that have advanced the discipline as well, including Slavery and Human Progress, The Anti-Slavery Debate, Capitalism and Abolitionism as a Problem in Historical Interpretation, In the Image of God, Religion, Moral Values and Our Heritage of Slavery, Challenging the Boundaries of Slavery, and finally, In Human Bondage, The Rise and Fall of Slavery in the New World. His books are not the only permanent reminder of his contributions and of his legacy. At Yale, my alma mater, where he's the Sterling Professor of American History Emeritus, he was the founding director of the Gilder Lehrman Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance, and Abolition, the gold standard for research centers, and a resource for every scholar in the field that he has so tirelessly shepherded. He's also trained many of the leading historians at work today, including Sean Wilentz, John Stauffer, Christine Stansel. His awards, some of which I've already mentioned, are too numerous to list. Among historians, David Davis is regarded as a paragon of integrity, decency, and astonishing brilliance. In a piece in the Chronicle of Higher Education entitled The Long Reach of David Brian Davis, Eric Foner said that Davis, quote, has probably had more influence than any other single scholar than I can think of on how we think about slavery and its central role in the history of the United States and the Western Hemisphere and the whole Atlantic world, unquote. Harvard University President Drew Gilpin Faust, herself a noted historian of the Civil War in the South, wrote of David in the New York Review of Books, quote, David Brian Davis has spent a lifetime contemplating the worst of humanity and the best of humanity. The terrible cruelty and injustice of slavery, perpetuated over centuries and across borders and oceans, overturned at last because of ideas and ideals given substance through human action and human agency, unquote. Ira Berlin, who received the Anisfield Book Award for Nonfiction in 2004, and who was also an anchor in the study of American slavery, wrote of David in the New York Times, quote, Davis is not merely a referee among historical gladiators, he gets in with the lions, forcing a rethinking of many of the most fundamental issues. Ira continues that he is an invaluable guide to explaining what has made slavery's consequences so much a part of contemporary American culture and politics, unquote. African American students in the generations preceding Davis were taught that they had no history, a brutal omission that remained in place even through the 2 world wars in which they fought and died. For them, the struggle was for a double victory, for democracy and citizenship abroad and democracy and citizenship at home. David Bryan Davis, like the great W.E.B. Du Bois, like the father of Negro History Week, which became Black History Week, which became Afro-American History Week, which became African American History Week, and which I predict, Marlon, will be Neo-Nubian History Week. Like John Hope Franklin, like him, all trained at Harvard, is part of that struggle. And thanks to him, African American history is not only studied, but also is indistinguishable from the larger American story he has so nobly advanced. It is my honor and great personal privilege to present this year's Anisfield Wolf Lifetime Achievement Award to my friend, my teacher, and my former colleague at Yale, and to a genuine American hero, Professor David Bryan Davis.
I've been asked, what has it been like to work on such a difficult subject as slavery over decades of time? And I should note that at the beginning, I was laboring in a world in which slavery had been marginalized and sometimes even ignored. So that one of the tasks I had was bringing this to the surface and convincing people that slavery had been an absolutely central part of American history, and that the abolition of slavery had been a very central moral event in our history. The ending of slavery in the United States was very much dependent in the 19th century on the activity of free blacks, who, above all, were able to refute and counter the major movement to ship freed blacks out of the United States and colonize them in Africa. I was repeatedly asked, what led you to such great interest in race and slavery? I have a rather interesting answer, I think. I never shared a classroom with an African American. I was in a wholly segregated white world. But after turning 18 in early 1945, and I was drafted into the Army, and I became exposed to the appalling racism of the old Jim Crow South, where I received a month of combat training. I found myself on a large troop ship bound for Europe. In this highly segregated army, I had never dreamed that there were any blacks on the ship. But after descending a long, winding staircase, I came upon what I imagined a slave ship would have looked like. There were hundreds and hundreds of near-naked blacks jammed together, many of them shooting craps. Months later, as a member of the Army's security police in Germany, I witnessed armed and bloody conflicts between white and black American troops, mainly evoked by white fury over the sight of black soldiers dating and dancing with German girls. I also heard incredibly racist speeches from American officers, including General Ernest N. Harmon, who came from New England and denounced the government for ever sending black soldiers to Europe. These experiences had a strong and lasting impact on my mind. While I failed to become actively involved in the civil rights movement, I became deeply shocked by the discovery that slavery and racism had been largely ignored in my undergraduate and graduate courses. I turned to the intellectual and international background of responses to slavery in Western culture. This expanded vision was partly the result of my undergraduate and graduate concentration on the history of political thought and philosophic views of human nature. My orientation does go back very much to the nature of man, and also the importance of moral issues, and that has had a very important part in my study of anti-slavery and the change in moral perceptions regarding the institution of slavery. At age 88, as I look back on my career, while I am overall quite happy concerning my books and writing, I take even greater pleasure in considering the students I have taught, beginning with 58 PhD dissertations I directed, which have led now to former students teaching from coast to coast in some of the major universities from Harvard to the Pacific Coast. In 1967, I was immensely honored when the problem of slavery in Western culture, the first volume of my trilogy, received the Anisfield Wolf Award. Now, it's a supreme honor, after the third volume has been published, to receive the Anisfield Wolf Award for Lifetime Achievement.
Good evening. I'm Karen Long, manager of the Anisfield Wolf Book Awards. Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Skip, for tonight. And to our honorees, your work is unique, and now you are all Anisfield Wolfians. To share video of this event, please visit the Anisfield Wolf website, anisfield-wolf.org. There you'll find historic information covering all 80 years of our prize, plus a lively Twitter feed and a community blog which welcomes contributions. Let me mention tonight that 3 Anisfield Wolf winners are returning to us. Zadie Smith will be at Oberlin College September 29th for a convocation talk, and next March 21st, Edwidge Dandicott will speak at our county library's Writers Center stage. Finally, Kamala Shamsi will keynote a brand new Cleveland Humanities Festival next April 5th at the Baker Nord Center. I am grateful to our partners, Venerable and New. I hope you saw the news just announced that the City of Cleveland, RTA, the Cleveland Foundation, and Land Studio have joined to make the Anisfield Wolf Book Awards the narrative backbone of the RTA's upcoming public art installations along the Red Line from the airport to downtown. It's a new day, and the first phase of this collaboration is to be complete by July. Now, thank you for your kind attentiveness, and please join us in the State Theater lobby. If you want your books signed by tonight's luminaries, please see to that immediately. We will toast these writers, enjoy refreshments, and enter the conversation. Thanks, and see you next door.
That's great.
You were great.